Chapter 18, budgeting. Have your book, have your workbook, have those numbers. It's really hard to do the budgeting worksheets and to really start to understand as a director how to be overwhelmed or to not be overwhelmed by numbers without having the numbers. So in the workbook, this activity is actually creating your budget. Now, let's talk a little bit about budgets and why budgets are important. First of all, you got to have income. You're going to have expenses, right? I tell people when you're first starting out and you're looking at budgeting, there's a couple of different places to start with budgeting. If you have never done a personal budget, let's start there. Start with 1 week personal budget. Let's look at your personal budget at home. This is a practice run for you. Do you know what a budget is? Can you stay to a budget? Can you balance a budget? So you know what you've made for the week. Do you know what it costs to feed you for a week? Have you even actually figured out what 1 week of rent or mortgage utilities actually costs? So for some folks, this is the easiest place to start, mostly because sometimes the numbers are smaller. So that's where I want you to start. So first, figure out for yourself, what does it cost to run your personal household for the week? What do I mean by run? So what does your rent cost for the week? What do your utilities cost for the week? What does your entertainment cost for the week? So entertainment includes all of your streaming services. If you eat out for the week, does that fall under food or entertainment? Okay, so just those categories. Now, if you have anybody else living in the house in addition to you, what does that cost per person for the week? Okay, so again, not a whole lot of really fancy math. What is your rent or your mortgage, right? What does the building cost? What are the utilities? Food and entertainment. Sorry, 4 things. I think I forgot food. Food and entertainment. I just want you to figure out those 4 things. And then I want you to figure out by the number of people in your household. And then I want you to figure it out by week. And then I want you to figure out your income. So you've got what does it cost and what is your income. So if you can start to figure this out, then this is going to start to help you figure out where you are, whether or not you're going to have an easy time or a difficult time doing your center's budget. Because your center is basically the same thing. Every single room has the same kinds of expenses. Yep. You've got your teacher. You've got your space, right? So overhead. So every single room has overhead. Okay, so the overhead for your infant classroom includes the entire building and all of the support staff. So if you have a cook, an assistant director who isn't in a classroom, a director, any sort of pest control, insurance, all of the expenses that go to the building. All of those expenses are going to be divided by the number of rooms you have. So we're going to make math easy. Let's just say you have 5 classrooms and all of your overhead is $1,000 a month. It probably isn't, but like I said, we're going to make math easy. So your rent, your pest control, your insurance, your cleaning supplies, your staff that are not classroom teachers, all of that goes into overhead. So you have 5 classrooms. That overhead per classroom is going to come out to roughly $200. As I said, the overhead total would be $1,000 per month, right? So you've got $200 in overhead. So your overhead would be $200. Hopefully I didn't totally lose you. So the overhead for that classroom is $200. And that is because the overhead for the entire building, there are 5 classrooms. The overhead for the entire building is $1,000. Like I said, this is not a realistic number, and I did that on purpose. So you take your overhead, divide your overhead by the number of classrooms. Now, each classroom has its own classroom overhead or classroom expenses. It's not really classroom overhead, it's classroom expenses. So your classroom expenses are going to be the expenses specific to that classroom, such as the classroom teacher. Now, if you have more than one teacher, it's going to be more than one teacher. So if you've got 2 teachers or 3 teachers that are specific to the infant classroom or the toddler classroom, all those expenses fall in to the expenses into that classroom. The supplies that classroom uses fall into the expenses for that classroom. Some programs will even take snacks and food specific into each classroom and not put it in overhead. I do this in the summer, especially when we look at field trips. All right, because you're going to look at field trips specific to age group. This is how you know if you've got enough butts in the seat. This is how you know what your break-even point is. Hopefully you're writing all this down. This is why you're supposed to have pen and paper. This is why I'm going slow. All right. So these are some of the numbers that you need to understand when you're working on budgets, when you're working on break-even points. Just because you know your income and expenses doesn't mean that you understand your break-even points. It doesn't mean that you understand whether or not your infant classroom can have 5 kids or should have 5 kids. Just because you're licensing space, licensing says, oh, that space can be licensed to 7 kids. Does it make sense to be licensed? Does it make sense to put 7 kids in that space? What do you have to have staffing wise for 7 kids? Is there a better space in the building to put your infants? How many infants do you really want with 2 teachers? I know it's not 7. Go look it up in licensing minimum standards. Go look at your chart. You always want to try to maximize minimum standard ratios. And if you can't do that with the amount of space, then that space is probably not optimal space for that age group. All right. So there are different types of ways of doing budgets. There's always going to be a startup budget. So if you've been operating or your organization's been operating, then a startup budget is not something that you necessarily need. Probably already moved past to that. Now you're in an operating budget. Again, depending on your role as the director, this may or may not be something that you do. But even if you are not really involved in the budget, you should still have an understanding of the budget. You should still ask about the budget because there's a pretty good chance your job is going to be affected by the budget. And there's going to be an expectation of your job related to the budget. Like, are you putting enough butts in the seat? Are you getting enough kids enrolled, families enrolled in the program? That affects the bottom line. Is the owner telling you to send people home if you don't have enough kids in a classroom? Well, if you don't understand how the budget works, you may not understand why that matters, right? If you've only got 2 kids in a classroom and you've got 2 teachers, you need to be consolidating classrooms. But if the owner doesn't understand minimum standards, it's your role to help them understand whether or not you can or can't consolidate the rooms. So this is where, as a director, your education is important. So you need to make sure that the owner understands the basics as far as age groups and age dynamics, the schedule of the day. You know, if you've got a classroom napping and another class that's on the playground, it doesn't matter what the ratios say. You're not going to try to merge those classrooms just to save an hour of staff. Okay, so this sometimes budgets can be a conflict between directors and owners, but it's helpful if you understand. Now, budgets can be done in spreadsheets. They can be done in a narrative format. They can be done in monthly, annually, quarterly. There is all kinds of software that'll help with this, but if you don't understand what you're looking at, it isn't going to matter. If you need a bookkeeper because you hate data entry, and again, maybe you don't understand what you're looking at, if you get a whole bunch of stuff from Sam's Club or Walmart or even any sort of grocery store, make sure that you're putting the items in the right category, depending on whoever's handling the accounting, how they look at stuff. Do they want to know it by classroom? Do they want to know it by general overhead? Do they put things by supplies? So do cleaning supplies need to go into cleaning supplies? Do food need to go into food? Are you part of a food program? This is all actually really, really important when you're looking at your numbers. So don't just throw the receipts in a shoebox and go, hey, it's all cool, we'll get it later. Because if you're paying attention to your numbers on a regular basis, it's really, really important. You need to make sure that as a director that you're having that conversation with whoever manages the money. So if you're an organization, a nonprofit that has a reporting program, and you have a treasurer or some sort of bookkeeping department, ask them what they're looking for. Ask them what they need, how they need it. They may have forms for you to fill out. They may be giving you regular monthly reports. Again, if you're not really sure what you're looking at, ask. If you're embarrassed to ask the people you work for, go find a class. It's okay. There is the Small Business Administration, SBA offices all over the country. There is SCORE, which is the Society of Corporate and Retired Executives. There are community colleges. There are all kinds of places where you can find out how to read various budget reports. And again, if you aren't sure, you can always reach out to us at texasdirector.org. Carrie or I can help you. We can help you find resources in your community if you are outside of our area. We can also reach out to you via Zoom and help you find the resources that you need. It's something that I'm sure that even in just this short amount of time, I've probably said words and phrases to you that you're probably going, I have no idea what a break-even point is, or why do I need a break-even point? That actually used to be one of the assignments in this class. I just want you to think about your break-even point. We no longer have that as an activity or even a project in the class anymore, but I do want you to think about what your break-even point is for your classroom, even if you only do it for one class, but you might even start at home. What does it cost for your children to have their entertainment on a Saturday, on a Sunday? Do you guys really enjoy your weekend? Does it break even for the week for the entertainment value? So with that, have a great day.